As a contractor, you don't want your work to be judged by a random, unqualified opinion. Yet that's exactly what can happen if you don't clearly define the standards by which your work will be evaluated. Even though his work was solid and never failed in similar conditions, the lack of clear industry standards in his contract left him vulnerable to interpretation. Hey guys, it's Karalynn, and welcome back to the podcast. Today is another session in Trust Your Gut, which is my book that launched in May of 25, which is all about residential construction contracts and the different provisions you should have in your contract as a residential contractor. And so today we're going to go over Chapter 11, which is all about standards. Okay, standards. Ben had been building decks for more than 20 years, and he had prided himself on his craftsmanship. When he got a call from Miss Parker, a homeowner living in the middle of nowhere, she wanted a simple deck overlooking her vast rocky landscape. The area was so remote that it didn't require a permit, and Ben was more than happy to take the job. The project went off without a hitch. Ben completed the deck, ensuring that it was sturdy and functional. Miss Parker seemed satisfied, using the deck regularly without any issues. But trouble began when Miss Parker learned from a neighbor from the next county over that the standard in their county required piers to be sunk 8 feet deep, not 6. Miss Parker, now uncertain about the structural integrity of her deck, decided to take the matter to arbitration. She argued that despite the deck's apparent functionality, the pier should have been deeper to meet what she considered a more appropriate standard for the region. Ben defended his work and pointed out that 6 feet had always been sufficient in that area, and he had never encountered any problems with decks built this way.
We'll leave that part in.
Okay. He even included the depth in his scope of work. Unfortunately, Ben didn't have a standards clause. Even though his work was solid and never failed in similar conditions, the lack of clear industry standards in his contract left him vulnerable to interpretation. Without a clause in his contract that clearly defined industry standards or his own practices, the arbitrator ruled in favor of Mrs. Parker, and she won $18,000, covering the cost of the deck. As a contractor, you don't want your work to be judged by a random, unqualified opinion. Yet that's exactly what can happen if you don't clearly define the standards by which your work will be evaluated. In this chapter, we'll explore the importance of including a standards clause in your contract to define how your work will be judged, ensuring clear expectations between you and your clients, protecting your business from subjective opinions, and safeguarding against disputes in a courtroom or arbitration. Setting the standards. A standards clause is a simple yet powerful provision in your contract that can mean the difference between winning and losing a dispute. Think of it as your shield, a way to avoid a client's claim that your work was defective, and more importantly, to assure your work is judged fairly, not by someone who's making it up as they go, but by the standards that you have set. I'm sure you've been there before. A client claims your work is defective and demands their money back. But what are they basing it on? Their gut feeling? A YouTube video they watched? Without standards in your contract, they or an arbitrator are free to pull in any expert who might have wildly different expectations from what is reasonable. Including a standards clause puts you in control. You set the rules and you ensure everyone's playing at the same game, your game. And if things go south and you end up in court or arbitration, this clause is your lifeline. The power of defining your own standards. Say you're a painting contractor. You've done a great job, but your client is standing 2 inches from the wall, nitpicking every tiny flaw. There's a little bump there, and I don't like the texture over there. But professional standards, like those from the Painting Contractors Association, PCA, say you should evaluate the paint job from 4 feet away. That is the industry standard. With a standards clause referencing the PCA, you can confidently tell your client, look, the work meets the standards. And guess what? Those are the standards that will prevail in court. You're not at the mercy of a client's emotions or unrealistic expectations. This is why setting your own standards, whether for painting, tiling, or framing, matters so much. This need becomes even more critical when we talk about remodeling. Remodelers deal with a wide range of tasks from plumbing, lighting, concrete work, and more. Inspectors of each of these own tasks will force their specific elements of the job, often judging it by strict standards that may differ from general building standards. Concrete inspectors will nitpick your foundation, while the AC inspectors scrutinize your ductwork. But if you've laid out the general standards in your contract, you give yourself breathing room. Let's take masonry as an example. Mixing mortar is an art form, but no matter how consistent you are, slight variations in color can occur. If you had clients in the past complain about this, it is essential to set expectations up front and include in your standards clause, mortar color may vary slightly depending on the mix. By including this language, you're defining what's acceptable and avoiding disputes over things you can't fully control. Keep it simple. Including a standards clause in your contract doesn't have to be overwhelming and complicated. In fact, it can be as simple as providing a URL or a link to relevant standards. You don't need to rewrite the pages of the industry regulations into your contract. Just point your clients to where they can find the details. For example, if you're a painting contractor, you could reference the PCA standards and include the link to their website. If you're a remodeler, you might use the National Association of Home Builders or even your local building code. In California, it's even easier because the state has specific rules for different types of contractors. You can simply refer to the California regulations that apply to your trade and include the link in your contract. For instance, if you're an HVAC contractor, you can reference the California Building Energy Efficiency Standards, or if you're a plumbing contractor, you can include the California Plumbing Code. By adding a simple link, you're making it clear to your client that these are the standards that your work will be judged by. It takes the guesswork out of the equation and ensures everyone is on the same page from the start. When disputes arise, you'll have something concrete to back you up, and your work will be measured against established benchmarks rather than subjective opinions. So don't overthink it. The standards clause doesn't require a lot of extra work. It's a straightforward line in your contract with a link to relevant standards. And best of all, it's a simple way to protect your business and avoid costly disputes without overwhelming your client. And while this is obvious, I'm going to say it anyways. Please read and be familiar with the standards you're setting for yourself. If you're going to include a link to the PCA standards or the California Building Code in your contract, take a little time to read them. You don't need to memorize them like you're preparing for an exam, but you should know the standards. You wouldn't want to end up in court realizing you've been holding yourself to the standard you didn't even know you agreed to. Why inspections aren't the gold standard. You might be thinking, well, I pulled a permit, so I'm covered, right? Wrong. Permits are great for showing that you're in compliance with local building codes, but it doesn't mean your work can't be deemed defective. Here's the kicker. The county inspector takes no liability for whatever work done is done incorrectly. So just because you passed inspection doesn't mean the inspector's approval will save you from disputes. It will save you if a dispute arises. A permit is merely evidence that you followed the rules of the municipality. It's not a get out of jail free card. If you really want to protect yourself, you need standards clause that clearly states the standards your work will be judged by. That way you're not leaving it up to chance or someone else's interpretation of what good looks like. Key takeaways. Set your standards so your work is not based on whatever standards the owner wants to set. It doesn't have to be complicated, just include the URL. Be familiar with the standards you set in your own contract. Set your standards. If you don't set your standards, someone else will. And that somebody is probably not going to have your best interests at heart. Just like Ben, the contractor who built the perfectly functional deck, but lost $18,000 in an arbitration battle because he didn't specify his own standards in the contract. He let someone else decide what acceptable meant, costing him big time. By including a standards clause in your contract, you can take control of how your work is judged. You set the rules and you give your clients a clear understanding of what they can expect. It's a win-win. Your clients know that they're getting quality work, and if a dispute arises, you've got a solid foundation to stand on, one built with standards you've chosen. Up next, warranties. Most offer implied warranties, but they may be more than what you'd like. Offer the warranty that you want to offer by including them in your contract, which is what we'll cover in the next chapter.
I heard choosing.
Choosing where?
Choosing. Is it? Did you mean
Chosen.
choosing or chosen?
Choose where? Choosing. Choosing.
It was like maybe the last two paragraphs.
By including standards and you take control of what? You've one built on standards you've chosen.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me do the last.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I wasn't sure.
No worries.
Yeah, I just want to make
Yeah.
sure.
By including a standards clause in your contract, you take control of how your work is judged. You set the rules and you give your clients a clear understanding of what they can expect. It's a win-win. Your clients know they're getting quality work, and if a dispute arises, you've got a solid foundation to stand on, one built with standards you've chosen. Up next, warranties. Most states offer implied warranties, but they may offer more than you'd like. Offer the warranty that you want to offer by including them in your contract, which is what we'll cover in the next chapter.